Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. I managed to get started. One of my old cars. I recently managed to purchase a true barn find. Now, for all you gearheads out there, all right, we all know what the term barn find means. Bargains are almost gone. About the only bargains left are those sitting in somebody's garage, somebody's barn, etc., in a field, stuffed back off in the woods or something like that. And nothing, as a car guy, it is an absolute thrill for somebody to call me up and say, hey, I got an old car in my garage. Would you be interested? And that's exactly what happened. So I managed to purchase my very first Corvette. It's not the most desirable of all Corvettes, but it's a 76 model. And it was absolutely, it's just unbelievable. It came with tons of extra parts, which I'll be selling. And I even managed to get it running. Purrs like a kitten. So it was a fantastic weekend from my perspective. So anyway, great to be back with you. And again, I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Okay, we have examined the doctrine in our study of the Olivet Discourse. Keep in mind that the majority view of the Olivet Discourse, that it is divided into two subjects. Now, everyone agrees with that except the dispensationalists. The dispensationalist does not believe that the Olivet Discourse, they believe it just barely even mentions the fall of Jerusalem, and that's in Luke chapter 20, 20 through 24. Other than that, the entirety of the Olivet Discourse is supposedly about the end of the age, either the rapture and the second coming or just the second coming. Depends on who you read in that regard. But we are told by the amillennialist and the postmillennialist that Matthew 24, 4-34 discusses Jesus' coming in AD 70. However, we are told that in verse 36, they kind of leave verse 35 hanging out there in Netherland, or Neverland. But in verse 36, we are told that there's a dramatic shift in subject matter when Jesus says, but of that day and hour, no man knows, but the Father only. And so we are told, it is insisted, that Jesus here changes the subject from the fall of Jerusalem and his coming in that event to the so-called end of time. Now, let me remind you that there is a presupposition at work. As a matter of fact, and I'll be talking more about it, Mr. Paul Ellis, in his book, AD 70, notice, and the end of the world. You see, Mr. Ellis takes it for granted, without even attempting to prove it, that the apostles wrongly, confusedly, linked the fall of Jerusalem with the, quote, end of the world, unquote. And that's a major error. Now, don't forget, hey, look, today's the last day of August 2020 for my 3-book special, all right? And these 3 books, my brand new books, Paul on Trial, Paul, the Pharisees, and the Resurrection, Watching for the Parousia, were Jesus' apostles confused, just like Mr. Ellis claims they were, and Can God Tell Time? I've evidently packed away a copy of He Came as a Thief. Okay, if you purchase these 3 books separately, they would cost you $50. However, today's the last day. Get in on it while you can. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a wonderful banner right there on the opening page. Just click on it, and it will show you how to order these books. So, for today only, U.S. orders only, total delivered price, $25. Now, I got in one order of books. I've already mailed a bunch of them off. Unfortunately, they shorted me considerably on my order. So I am waiting on the rest of my inventory order. I've already ordered more, so please be patient with me. I do apologize. I ordered plenty of books, and they have delayed the shipping. Okay, so if you are out of the U.S. and you would like a copy of my books, then send me an email and say, Don, I'd love to have a copy of your books in PDF form, and I will be glad to sell you a copy of all 3 books. Now, don't forget, if you've already got a copy of Can God Tell Time, and you wish to substitute He Came as a Thief, just send me a note, and I'll be glad to do that substitution. But again, today is the last day to take advantage of this absolutely fantastic special offer. And we're working on another fantastic special offer for you for the month of September. Be watching for that announcement. Okay, enough of all of that. Now then, watch this. In Matthew chapter 24, and listen, what we're about to get into in our studies of the Olivet Discourse is, to me, some of the most powerful proof that the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided into 2 separate subjects. When we get into what we call chapter 25, I believe that the evidence is absolutely overwhelming that Jesus was talking about AD 70. So you can be looking for that as we begin that study for tomorrow. But in the meantime, today, I want to take a very quick notice of Matthew 24, 45 and following. Now remember, he's supposedly talking about the end of the world, supposedly talking about the, quote, second coming. Well, he is talking about the second coming, but he's not talking about the end of the world. So Jesus posed a question to his apostles. Who then is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. So we're talking about the coming of the Lord. Oh, wait a minute. First of all, Matthew 24, verse 30 is talking about the coming of the Lord. So upon what basis, what exegetical basis, do we say, oh, well, yeah, in Matthew 24:30 we have the coming of the Lord. But after verse 36, he's talking about the different coming of the Lord. Really? Where's the proof of that? Jesus doesn't say, now look, I was talking about one coming there, I'm talking about another coming here. I'm sorry, folks, that's unjustified. So anyway, he continues, verse 47. Assuredly I say to you that he will make him ruler over all of his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with him, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of. Now, let's not forget, in Revelation chapter 3, Jesus posits this coming at the unknown hour in the lifetime of the Sardisian church. That generation. So once again, we have to ask the hermeneutical question, if the coming of the Lord at an unknown hour in Revelation 3, 1-3, was in the first century, then upon what basis do we say in Matthew chapter 24 that the coming of the Lord at an unknown hour has to be an end of the world coming? Oh, but that's not all. Notice that Jesus said, if that evil servant says in his heart, the master is delaying, and begins to beat his servants. Did you notice that Jesus said the master delays his coming? Well, we are forced with a little bit of a conundrum here. What makes it an evil servant? Is he intrinsically evil? Good question, isn't it? But secondly, notice it says, this wicked servant says, my master delays his coming. And he begins to beat the other servants. So I've got to ask you a question. Was the servant evil because he said the master delays? Or was he evil because he beat the servants? he had some reason to think the Master was delaying his coming. This issue of the so-called delay of the Lord's coming is what has perplexed scholars for centuries, even to today. Now, here's the question. Was the Lord going to delay his coming indeterminately for centuries, for millennia? Well, we have the answer to that in a host of passages. In Romans chapter 13, 11 and following, and Paul says, and now do this, knowing the hour. Wait a minute. It was the Father who knew the hour, who was going to send the Holy Spirit to reveal things to come. Here is Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, and he says, they knew the hour. They knew what hour it was. The hour for what? It is high time to wake out of sleep. Folks, that's resurrection language, taken directly from Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. Not only that, look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 37. In verse 37, he is contemplating the coming of the Lord of Hebrews 9:28. To those who eagerly look for him, he shall appear again a second time apart from sin for salvation. Second coming. He never abandons that discussion. He is still focused on the coming of salvation all the way through chapter 10. And in verse 37, he says, and now in a very little while. The Greek is hoson mikron. How little? Very little. In a very little while, the one who is coming will come, watch this, will not delay. Now, he was writing in a context of intense persecution, of those who were being persecuted, and as a result of that persecution, were not drawing back from their faith. Hebrews 10, 38 and 39. In other words, they were not becoming evil and wicked servants who were saying, hey, he's delayed his coming, let's eat, drink, and be merry. But he affirms in the clearest language possible, in a very little while. Now look, Hebrews is written over 30 years after Jesus spoke the words in Matthew 24. And he warned about saying, the Master delays his coming, let's just go about our business or let's mistreat others. But the inspired writer, writing over 30 years after Jesus spoke, said, in a very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. Folks, the inspired writer said 2,000 years ago, no delay in the Lord's coming. And yet, scholar after scholar, commentator after commentator says, well, of course, we all know the Lord's delayed his coming for 2,000 years. No, he hasn't. Or he lied. Or Hebrews 10 lied. Which is it? There was not going to be a delay. It was all going to happen, as Jesus said, Matthew 24 and verse 34, verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass until all of these things. Well, what did all of these things include? Verse 30, the coming of the Lord. Until all of these things are fulfilled. So here we are, once again, Hebrews chapter 10, writing in that very generation, saying, in a very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. Listen, folks, it's time for us as believers to take Jesus and his writers at their word. The coming of the Lord was near in the first century. It was not delayed in the first century. It occurred in the first century. Okay, I'm out of time. Don't forget the fantastic 3-book special. Today's your last day. Take advantage. August 2020 3-book special. Contact me if you want PDFs, all right? Thanks so much for joining me. Hey, read Matthew 25, 1 to 13 for your assignment for tomorrow. So I'll see you on the flip side.